Okay, let's get one thing straight right off the bat. Nobody, and I mean nobody, saw this one coming. Not the rumor mill, not the insiders, not even that one guy on the forums who claims his uncle works at the factory in Ohio. Honda, for nearly 20 years, has been sitting on one of the most beloved names in their entire two-wheeled catalog, and they just opened the vault. But here's the kicker. What they've wrapped around that resurrected badge isn't just a nostalgia play. It's arguably the most aggressive, snarling street rod cruiser they've ever dared to price tag. If you were throwing a leg over bikes back in the early 2000s, this name is going to land like a punch to the sternum. And if you weren't, well, by the time we're done here, you're going to be kicking yourself for missing out. We're talking about the all-new 2026 Honda Shadow Sabre 1100. So let's just dive in, shall we? Because there's a lot to chew on. Honda's design language over the last few years has gotten sharper, more deliberate, like they're finally done playing it safe. And the Shadow Sabre 1100, it's them flexing that newfound muscle on a platform people have been practically begging for since the original got the axe. The bones are all there. That iconic raked-out front end, the wide, pulled-back bars that make you feel like you're riding a sofa with an attitude problem, and that low, menacing stance. But everything else, every single surface has been completely reimagined for a modern rider. The fuel tank is sculpted tighter at the knees, the headlight housing is a gorgeous piece of machined aluminum, goodbye stamped chrome, and the rear fender, it hugs that rear wheel so close, it almost looks like a one-off custom job you'd drop a fortune on, and it just rolled off the showroom floor. Now this is where it gets really interesting, so stick with me because most of the other channels are gonna breeze right past this. Honda didn't just take an old platform, slap a fresh coat of paint on it, and call it a day. No. The heart of this beast is a completely reworked 1100cc liquid-cooled V-twin, still with that signature 45-degree spread that made the original Sabre feel so undeniably, well, Honda. But this time, it's got a revised fuel injection system and a slightly higher compression ratio. The old VT 1100 C2 was pushing, what, high 60s in the horsepower department? This new unit, we're expecting it to land north of 80 horsepower at the crank with a torque curve that fills in nice and low and stays flat almost to the red line. That's the kind of number that takes a bike from nice, comfortable cruiser to something you actually want to ring out on a twisty back road. Like, actively seek out. But let me ask you something, and be honest, does a cruiser really even need more power than that? I mean, honestly, probably not. You're not going to be lapping a track on this thing, that's for sure. But Honda knows their audience, and their audience has spent the last 15 years watching the competition get faster, sharper, more aggressive, while Honda's cruisers stayed, well, comfortable and safe, and a little boring. This is Honda finally saying, fine, you want a street rod that can actually back up the name? Here it is. Now stop complaining. And let's not overlook what's happening underneath that gorgeous new bodywork, because the engineering here is genuinely clever. The frame is a new double cradle steel design, noticeably stiffer than the old chassis, which means this bike actually holds its line through a sweeping corner instead of wallowing around like a hippo in a swimming pool. Up front, you've got an inverted telescopic fork, a real departure from the old conventional unit, giving you way better feedback and resisting dive under hard braking. Out back, twin shocks with adjustable preload. Nothing radical, sure, but they're tuned specifically for this chassis rather than being some carryover part from another model in the lineup. Brakes got a serious upgrade too. A single front disc has been swapped for dual front rotors with radial mount calipers. Sounds like overkill for a cruiser, until you remember this thing is pushing more weight and more power than the original ever did. Standard ABS comes across the board, no surprise there. Honda hasn't sold a bike without it in this category for years. Here's a little pattern interrupt for you. Picture this scene. You roll up to a stoplight, giving that V-twin a little blip, and the guy next to you on some sport bike doesn't even glance over, because, you know, cruisers don't intimidate anybody, right? Wrong, because the moment that light turns green, this Sabre is going to surprise him, and that, right there, is exactly the reaction Honda is engineering for. That little smirk you'd have under your helmet, that's what they're selling. Moving into the cockpit, and this is where you can really feel those 2 decades of difference. The original Sabre had a single analog speedo and basically nothing else, like riding a tractor with a nicer seat. The 2026 version gets a circular TFT display, fully digital, showing speed, RPM, gear position, fuel range, and yes, it pairs with your phone. Turn-by-turn directions fed right to that screen? Check. Call and text notifications? Check. Switchable ride modes that adjust throttle response and traction control intervention? Check, check, and check. You get a rain mode for those sketchy, grip-limited days, a standard mode for everyday puttering around, and a sport mode that sharpens the throttle mapping and loosens the traction control leash just enough to let that V-twin breathe. Seat height sits low, somewhere around 27 inches, keeping that confident, feet flat on the ground stance that made the original such an easy bike to live with, whether you're newbie or a grizzled veteran. Wet weight is expected to land close to 580 pounds, which is actually lighter than you'd expect given everything Honda packed in, thanks to a lighter subframe and a smaller, more efficient cooling package up front. And can we talk about the styling for a second? Because Honda clearly understands that nostalgia alone doesn't sell bikes anymore. The color options leaked so far include a deep candy dark red that's a direct callback to the original 2000 model, a matte black metallic for the rider who just wants to disappear into the night, and a pearl white with gold pipe striping that honestly might be the sleeper hit of the lineup. Every version gets blacked-out engine covers, a 2-into-2 exhaust with a deep, almost menacing burble at idle, and LED lighting front to back, including a signature taillight design that traces the rear fender. So now you're probably wondering, okay, how much is all this going to cost me? Based on where Honda has positioned her current 1100cc cruiser lineup, and factoring in all that extra chassis and electronics work, expect the Shadow Sabre 1100 to land somewhere in the $11,000 to $12,000 range here in the States for the standard trim. There's a possible higher spec version pushing past $13,000 if Honda offers a DCT automatic clutch option, which, knowing their recent lineup decisions, feels increasingly likely. That price point puts it right in the crosshairs of some serious competition. Indian's entry-level cruisers, certain Harley-Davidson Sportster trims, Kawasaki's Vulcan lineup, they're all circling that same number, all chasing the same rider. But none of them have 2 decades of nostalgia baked into the name the way this bike does. None of them get to say, "We're back and we brought receipts." Here's something I haven't seen anyone else talking about yet, and it's going to change how you think about this entire release. Sources close to Honda's Powersports division have hinted that the Shadow Sabre nameplate isn't just a one-off revival. It might be the first domino in a much larger plan to bring back the entire Shadow lineup. The Aero, the Spirit, maybe even the Ace, all rebuilt around this same modern platform philosophy. If that's true, we are looking at the beginning of one of the biggest cruiser comebacks in the industry in the last 10 years, and that changes everything about how seriously you should be paying attention to this bike right now. But before you get too excited and start planning your dealership visit, there's something about this whole release that I have to tell you, and it's going to completely change how you look at everything I just said. This bike doesn't exist. Not yet, anyway. Everything you just watched, the specs, the styling, the price point, the engineering breakdown, that's a concept build, a vision of what a 2026 Honda Shadow Sabre 1100 could look like if Honda decided to bring this legendary nameplate from the dead. Honda has made no official announcement about reviving the Shadow Sabre, no confirmed production date, no dealership allocation, nothing on the books. What you just saw is speculative design, grounded in Honda's real engineering history and where their cruiser lineup appears to be heading. So why build this video at all? Because the Shadow Sabre deserves the conversation. It was genuinely an important motorcycle, the bike that gave Honda's cruiser lineup teeth back in 2000. And there's a real argument that with the right modern updates, it could do exactly the same thing again. Sometimes the best way to honor a legendary nameplate is to imagine where it could go next. Alright, I want to hear from you. Drop it in the comments. Would you actually buy a modern Shadow Sabre if Honda built it for real? And which other discontinued Honda model deserves this same treatment? If you want to see exactly that, I just put together a full concept breakdown on another legendary Honda nameplate that got the same deep dive treatment, and trust me, it's just as wild as this one. Click the video on your screen right now, and I'll see you in the next one.